Next, I want to get into the topic of the day, which will really be where we're going to spend tomorrow as our next day on Thursday, Friday as well. Here is the key term to understand, and I've used it a couple times, but let's take the moment to actually define it. Biogeochemical cycles, way up there in the left. It's referring, and we have the root word bio for life, we've seen that. We have geo, meaning it's in the earth, or it's part of the earth system or the earth setup. And then chemical, of course, we're talking about not just elements, but it could be compounds as well. And then their movement all around the earth. So we're talking about movement of matter, and we're giving particular focus to at what time are these in the abiotic sphere, and what time are these in the biotic sphere. So I put a couple elements up here just for reference. Hydrogen, it's a key element. It's in many, many compounds. Lots of those compounds support life. Last time we got together, one of the things we kept talking about as it relates to the narrative of the class is we really care about water and the movement. We care about climate and weather. We care about the geologic history and the movement of matter on our planet, because all of those make Earth suitable for life. It sets up the conditions that are suitable. Now we're just talking about that same thing, but we're zooming in a little bit. So instead of thinking about rock, we're looking at actual material and compounds. Hydrogen is mostly in the atmosphere. That's where we typically find it. Oxygen, a diatomic molecule as well, has 2 covalent bonds. It's out in the atmosphere. We need oxygen, but it needs to be in a place where we can use it. Nitrogen is another element. It has 3 covalent bonds. Really hard to break it apart, yet we need it a lot. We see other kinds of forms, carbon dioxide, which is a really stable non-polar molecule, water, which is a really stable polar molecule that allows for a lot of chemical processes in living systems. We see nitrates, sulfur dioxides, nitrous oxides, methane gases. But these elements are moving all around, and there's an exchange between the abiotic and the biotic sphere. Last time we did our field exercise, you guys gave me decent stuff, but it was our preliminary exercise. You had almost no resident knowledge at that time. You're increasing your knowledge, and this is one of the critical links to understand. So the only learning targets, I kind of formatted this slide a little differently because it's such a quick lecture, but I want you to understand and be able to describe how these molecules are moving and exchanging between the abiotic sphere and the biotic sphere, and then understanding how human interactions may alter that. That'll be a theme that we'll hit over and over and over again many times in this class. So we're going to pay attention really to about 4 of the biogeochemical cycles. The first is we need oxygen and we need hydrogen, and we really like when those molecules are together. Most living organisms are composed of extremely high proportions or percentages of water. Humans, 70%. Many plants as much as 90%. So water is a really critical thing. We've seen a lot with water already with climate and weather, evaporation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration into the soil. But 2 phases of it that we haven't really paid attention to are the part that we just recently learned or refreshed our memory on, which is water is excreted or released into the environment, into the atmosphere from plants or as a liquid form from animals as a byproduct of cell respiration. So water is coming out of organisms, that's key. We also see that the way that that water gets into organisms is related to the trophic pyramid. While plants take it into their roots, when I eat a pear, when I eat an orange, or a primary consumer takes in a primary producer, they absorb a lot of that water as well. There are many organisms, some of the microbes that we just saw, absorb all of the water they need just through eating. There are a lot of organisms like that. So we've seen that the rate of water exchange from groundwater is really the slowest phase, but the rest of this is relatively quick. The next one I want to talk about, we've also talked about a little bit, but we haven't looked at it in this cycle kind of form, is the carbon cycle. So as it relates to cell respiration and photosynthesis, we need sun to power the reaction, where we can take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and bring it and incorporate it into plants. So now it's in the biosphere. We convert it through chemical synthesis into glucose and that can go into the trophic system. We see that theme emerging again. Glucose, it travels the matter and energy, and it moves and it is exchanged through many parts of the biosphere through the trophic levels. There are a couple other places where the carbon cycle is relevant that don't come up in our previous discussion. One of them is huge bodies of water, especially the ocean. They're a carbon sink. They're a reservoir. They absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into the hydrosphere. We also see that there are natural sources like volcanoes that produce and through combustion make carbon dioxide go out into the atmosphere. Fires, when they're anthropogenic caused, like we saw in the Amazon rainforest, in other words, caused by humans, that combustion takes carbon dioxide from the biosphere and puts it out into the atmosphere. But there are natural forest fires as well, so there's a natural complementary component of that. The process is the same, but the cause is different. But humans have a really large role in how they've disrupted this cycle. Decaying matter from things that have died under its normal process. When those things die, it goes into the soil and the material decays and it's sequestered in the pedosphere or the geosphere over time. So we have millions of years of living organisms that were a carbon sink themselves and got suppressed under sedimentary rock. And now, by extracting that material out and combusting that carbon, we're taking the carbon that used to be in the geosphere and putting it in the atmosphere. The nitrogen cycle has many parts to it. It's not too complex, but there are a lot of stages. The nitrogen cycle reminds me a lot of that mythological story where the guy has food and water all around him, but he can't get to any of it. That's the case with the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is the most abundant element, or most abundant compound in the atmosphere. It's about 80%. But those three covalent bonds are really hard to break apart. So we say they're not bioavailable. It's there, but it's not in a form that can be used. So something has to happen in order to make the nitrogen bioavailable. That first step is this thing called nitrogen fixation. There are certain organisms, microbes, that live in the soil that have enzymes that can sever those three covalent bonds and convert the form of nitrogen from N2 to ammonia. More microbes convert it from ammonia to ammonium. Additional microbes take it from ammonium to a nitrate. It gets converted to a nitrite. We call all of that stage nitrification. Once we get it to the nitrate phase, that's when it's finally bioavailable. So plants and other organisms can incorporate it into their matter through this process called assimilation. Once it's in plants, here's the theme that we've seen. It's in the trophic levels. Primary producers have it, organisms eat that, and they get it into their matter. It's such a critical element. The presence of nitrogen allows for plants and organisms to be productive and flourish. It's used in DNA. It's also present in the amine group of proteins. So in order for protein synthesis to occur, we have to have the availability of nitrogen. If it's limited, those plants or organisms really struggle to survive. When it's abundant, they're extremely productive and healthy and flourishing. Feel good? I'm going to just barely mention the sulfur cycle, and I just know you're not responsible for understanding very much about the sulfur cycle at this phase. But I'm going to mention it now because it's a biogeochemical cycle, and we have a lot of natural sources for it, which is volcanoes, but we also have a lot of anthropogenic sources for it, which is combustion of fossil fuels, and it's related to acid deposition. So we get sulfur in the environment. We need sulfur, but excess sulfur can create a problem, especially when it creates compounds that we don't like when sulfur links up with water vapor. And so I just wanted to mention that that's a process, and humans have been heavily disruptive in this process, but we're not going to worry about that cycle very much compared to the other four. Last one here is the phosphorus cycle. We've been talking a lot about cell respiration. And I've been trying to mention in a diligent way that that is matter energy. So we're not talking about the bond energy. We're talking about the molecules themselves facilitate a chemical reaction. So glucose is an input for phosphorylation of ATP. And so ATP is the thing that causes all energy. It drives chemical reactions. It drives transport across the cell membrane. It causes muscles to contract and move. Everything that you see that's powered uses ATP. And that P is the phosphate group. And so, of course, we need phosphate. So in order to power a lot of things, the presence of phosphate is critical. How does it get into organisms? What's the abiotic to biotic link? This is a unique cycle in that it's the only cycle that has no atmospheric component. So there's nothing in the air. It's all on the earth and in the ocean. We can move it from place to place through geologic processes, glaciation, erosion, weathering, etc. It's in a fairly bioavailable form already, so plants can take it in when it's available. When they have it, they're very productive, they thrive and flourish, and then it's in the trophic system. It starts primary producers, it flows to consumers, all the way up and down the food chain. So a lot of these elements that we get and we need for our lives and other animals need, they're derived from the trophic, the ability of matter to move through the food chain with inside of a food web. So what we see is the movement of phosphorus basically takes place in this way. When organisms die and decompose, it's put back into the soil. Other processes move it around from here to there. A lot of times it ends up in bodies of water in the ocean through weathering and erosion, and gets recycled back into mountain and matter through the normal geologic processes. A very slow cycle. Okay. Crash course on biogeochemical cycles, but we're going to cover it a lot in our lab setting on Friday. So again,